So you've established you like one or all of three of the following things: Mars, robots and plastic. But you don't know how to use that lust productively. Well, good lady or sir, I am your narrator Benji, and this is the guide to building your new Adeptus Mechanicus army, up from scratch. Today's video will see us go from 0 to 25 power, aka 500 points of AdMech. Remember, the power is used as the measuring stick for a unit's value in open and narrative play, the casual and thematic formats, and points are used primarily because of their added granularity in matched play, the more competitive but ultimately balanced way to play. Today's breakpoint will mean you will also have your own fully fledged combat patrol army, the first rung on the recognised army size ladder. But future videos will guide you through the process of crafting your own incursion, strike force and ultimately onslaught sized forces. But the whole point of these videos isn't just to give you a set of instructions, but to guide you on your journey to understanding the faction and what it can bring to the table. As such, we'll be building two distinct forces that should highlight the diversity you can find just in this one codex. But first things first, we need to figure out our angles. What two different themes could we possibly foist on you when thinking about AdMech? Well, in a codex with so much cross-pollination, the only sensible choice was to focus on a humanoid-centric build that focuses mostly on SKITARII units. You know, those cybernetic dudes that form the bulk of the AdMech's military. And then we'll flip that coin over and shove every single big piece of hulking metal we could find front and centre. Don't fret though, whichever route you take, you'll still be sucking at the teat of the machine god. So by virtue of complete randomness, we're going to kick things off with the SKITARII build. And for this, we're strongly encouraging Forge World Mars as your chosen allegiance, for the obvious reason that all your army, including the SKITARII, will gain access to Canticles of the Omnicia, army-wide abilities that are available during each battle round of the game. As is normal with this breakpoint, we will comfortably fit everything into a patrol detachment, ensuring we don't start off on the wrong foot. Our warlord for today then is the newly moulded SKITARII Marshal, the only available SKITARII HQ for that matter, so an obvious choice for what we're going for. This won't at all rule out bringing a tech priest or two at future breakpoints, but for now we stick with the Marshal because he can pick a unit to ignore the downside of the current Doctrina imperative, and nearby units get to reroll wound rolls in its aura. However, because he is cheap as chips, don't be expecting him to light it up with his own combat prowess. For troop choices, we're going for pistachio and cookie dough, with one unit of 10 SKITARII Rangers who come by default equipped with 30-inch range strength 4 weaponry, and with access to a couple of higher strength weapons when bringing a unit of 10. And they've got a sneaky little 3-inch move at the start of the first battle round. These are adept at capping objectives and still firing pot shots, but at this point's cost they're certainly not the most durable. The different flavoured ice cream here is a unit of 10 SKITARII Vanguard. Now, if the Rangers are your medium to long range infantry rank and file, then the Vanguard are the short to medium range version. They have a somewhat unusual debuff aura that subtracts 1 from any engaged unit strength and toughness, and remain fairly mobile with their 18-inch range assault weaponry. And whilst they can take the same special weapons that their brother-sister Rangers can, most of these being long range are better served on that unit than the Vanguard. Filling our one and only elite slot is a unit of 5 SICARIAN infiltrators, your scouty shock trooper assassins that, believe it or not, pack quite a punch, and with 2 wounds and a 4 up save, 5 up invuln, they aren't as squishy as some of their brethren. What's more, you can't re-roll hit or wound rolls whenever you attack them within 12 inches, which is 1 part situational, 1 part pretty sweet. What you do need though is a plan for these guys. They are your razor sharp surgical knife and can do a serious amount of damage for their cost. As we move on our lone fast attack choice, I'm pleased to say that we're most of the way there to seeing representation from all of the common battlefield roles. And rest assured that's in the spirit of this series. What that does mean though is that a lot of your army at this early stage will be good at different things, and so it's appropriate to mention if you're new to the game that this might result in a slightly steeper learning curve. Digressing aside, we have a unit of 6, that's right 6 Cerberus Raiders. Our short to medium range cavalry option get to move twice in the first battle round. And with a 12-inch move, that basically means they can get into combat range with a good portion of the battlefield on turn 1. It's really a good job and all, because with only 2 wounds, you need to get them tied up with something or they'll be a very tempting target. Their offensive prowess though is nothing to sniff at, as they can target characters without restriction and they inflict mortal wounds on a 6 when making ranged attacks. Sweet gravy. Believe it or not, that still leaves space for a heavy support choice in the SKITARII piloted ONAGER DUNECRAWLER. aka a walking tank with all sorts of gun options for you to rain down merry hell on your opponents. Not only that, for its cost it isn't the easiest to take out, boasting a meaty 11 wounds. Granted, it's not particularly mobile, but with mostly 36 plus inch range weaponry, you can get this out to do whatever job you need it to. So as you can see, 500 points goes a long way with AdMech, and it's not as though you're skimping a huge deal on wounds. What you do have though is a well-rounded cross-section of some of what the SKITARII have to offer. And you also have at least 1 unit at any given time that can deal with most of what your opponent might be bringing to the table. It's time now then to channel our inner robot and don as much heavy machinery as we can possibly muster. In terms of Forge Worlds, you could certainly go a number of different ways, but I would consider Forge World Lucius for its extra shooting range and damage dampening dogmas, or Metallica because it has the best name and it allows you to keep your army mobile without suffering penalties to hit on assault and heavy weaponry. Either way, the focus here is on the units, so let's get to the datasheets. For our lone HQ in this patrol detachment, we, as is expected, will be rocking one of the 4 available non-named Tech Priests. And here we're taking the slightly more expensive Tech Priest Dominus, mainly because it can stand on its own 2 feet slightly better than the cheaper Techno-Archaeologist and Engine Seer, and has better offensive capabilities, but it's also the only one of the 4 that can give a re-roll hits bubble to a core unit within 6 inches. To be fair, none of the choices would have been bad, but the Dominus fits nicely for us and is arguably the most well-rounded option. So if you were wondering where all the robots were, then you won't be disappointed with our troop choices, as they're both of the KATAPHRON variety. Mobile gun platforms with tank tracks that have an exceptional stat line for a troop choice. We're going to take then a unit of each of the 2 available options for variety, with the first being the slightly less expensive unit of 3 Breachers. These have longer range, higher strength weapons and a 2-up armor save, both of which is better than their counterparts, but conversely they also have a much better weapon in close combat. Now, whilst both units are not core, with all the ancillary buffing benefits that go with that, they do get objectives secured. So these guys can still sit on a point whilst being not particularly easy to take down, and also dole out the damage as well. The other choice for your KATAPHRON are a unit of 3 destroyers. A slightly more expensive option, but what you get for your extra investment is considerably greater volume of fire, at the expense of being lower strength and lower damage. They also have only a 3-up save alongside the 6-up invuln both units get. But what you're also getting is more high strength options in their loadout. But ultimately, despite the extra cost, it's the destroyers that are going to have the most targets in these smaller point games. It's at this point that I really had to buck my usual urge to get a decent threshold of bodies on board, and so I was looking keenly at the Electro Priests to take up an elite slot, but they'd be far too exposed in this list with only 1 wound, and so we'll come back to them as we grow the army. Instead, we then double down on hardware with a heavy support SKORPIUS disintegrator, which churns out a great deal of voluminous strength 4 to strength 7 shots, and with 12 wounds and a decent save, you're going to get to use this for at least a couple of turns to wreak merry hell on your opponent's forces. But that there is your meagre sized robot jocks build, with a remarkable 8 models totaling 25 power and 445 points. Trust me when I say though that what it lacks in numbers, it gains in the ranged footprint this brings to the table, and the targets you can cover with its arsenal. You'd usually expect so little to be doling out low amounts of high strength shots, but that's just not the case here. There's plenty of shooting to be had, so you can certainly have plenty of fun letting loose with these guys. But definitely consider as well, if you're playing with the points, upgrading the Tech Priest with one of their available Holy Orders. With all that being said, there is a not insignificant cost attached to building an AdMech army. For that reason, and if you're balking at the prices on screen, then you can always consider the Combat Patrol box for AdMech. This will get you a mix of SKITARII and mechs, which is a perfectly viable and for that matter more conventional way of going about things. But still, this is a lot of money for 500 points. But also another means to show you that ultimately the more models you buy, which is one downside of a SKITARII centric build, the more it's going to comparatively cost you. That though concludes this chapter of our story. I must say I'm surprised how different the gestation phase of these two armies worked out. Of course, I've gone a little bit too extremes committing to each's theme, but you didn't come here for homogeny now, did ya? Good luck with whichever way you go, and be sure to keep an eye on future videos in this series that will take our armies all the way up to the tippy top of the Onslaught sized mountain. Once again, I have been your narrator Benji, and this video has ended.